Talker here. So today I thought I'd talk about my second race bike. Now, if you watched the previous video about my first race bike, you know I had a severe disagreement with Yamaha and had made a decision to actually purchase a Suzuki RG500. Just put a picture of it here. The plan originally was to move from GP racing to production racing, where I wouldn't have a problem buying parts. Unfortunately, Suzuki was supposed to have that motorcycle available in May, and I got contacted by the dealer and told that the earliest I would be able to get a bike would have been August. So that kind of like screwed up the idea for racing for that season. So I ended up canceling the purchase for that bike and started looking around for another bike. And it took several months, but eventually what I found was a 1985 Honda RS250. Now in '84, Honda had come back to the 250 Grand Prix class, and the 85 was just basically what would be called the production racer version of the 84 bike. So basically the same bike, it's just made a little bit more for mass production as opposed to a factory one or two of. Picked it up used from a guy who actually had to sell it because he was actually going to be purchasing an 86 bike from one of the top racers in the US, who was done with it for the season. So I picked the bike up and immediately was impressed with how much better the Honda was than the Yamaha. Most two-stroke engines of that era had either what was called a piston port type system or a rotary valve. Now the rotary valve was common on the Rotax engines, and it was actually very common for 125 and 250 GP racing in Europe. It wasn't as popular in North America because rotary valves are a little bit harder to tune than piston port. But Honda, what they actually did was take a look at the dirt bike section that they were very strong in, and borrowed the reed valves from their two-stroke dirt bikes and put them in the road racers. Now at the time, reed valves weren't very popular because they didn't have the technology yet to make the reeds work. What would happen is that higher speeds, reeds would flutter, which affects your horsepower, and the reeds actually would snap off and the engine would inhale them, and it's not a good thing at 150 miles an hour. But some companies have come up with some newer type of fiber plastic reeds, which actually were lasting a lot longer, and Honda incorporated them into their bikes. The big improvement on the Hondas was that the reed valve bikes were very easy to start. I literally, I used to work on the bike in my garage, my mother's garage, and I could literally start the bike in the garage. Like I didn't have to open the door and go down the street. With the Yamaha, if it didn't fire up right away, you might be looking at pushing it for like literally a city block to try to get it to fire up. The Yamahas were very sensitive to carburation, and the Hondas were not quite as bad. The bike also came with an aluminum frame. It came with a 17-inch front wheel, which was at the time like unusual because forever bikes have been racing with 18-inch wheels, and they were aluminum replicas of the carbon fiber built-up wheels that Freddie Spencer was using on the 500 GP bikes he was racing back at that time. The bike itself was very easy to work on. There was a problem with the top cylinder. You had to have a special tool to be able to access it, which Honda fixed 2 years later, but it was kind of annoying if you didn't have the specific wrench or whatnot. You end up doing like to take a cylinder head off, you were doing like a quarter turn on a nut, and if you're between your practice sessions trying to check your cylinder before you go back on the track, it's kind of a pain. But you know, the big difference between Honda and Yamaha was Honda would sell you parts, and the impressive part was Honda actually, that for the first year I was racing with them, Honda would actually, you just call them up and order the parts, and they'd send them to you directly, FedEx them to you the next day. You didn't have to worry about paying them, they'd send you the bill. Now the only downside with it was, racers being racers, we had guys who were buying way more parts than they could afford, and when the bills would come up, they would just went and disappear. So Honda kind of got burned on that, and it got spoiled that down the road it became, he would you'd place your part order, and then you'd you know, an hour or two later he'd call you back and says, okay, here's how much we need, and you would send him a check or a money order or whatever, and he'd ship the parts out as soon as the money order arrived. The parts guy from Honda was an awesome guy. Absolutely loved dealing with the guy. If you had a problem, he would try his best to try to solve it. Like if you were having some sort of issue with the bike, he'd say so and so also had that issue, and here's what he did, and like it was a great group of guys to deal with. The bike itself was a lot of fun to race. It handled really well. It pulled beautifully out of the corners. You know, I actually managed to race, I think it was 2 seasons with it before I replaced it. And the only reason it got replaced was to be competitive, I had to have a newer bike. And at the time, it seems kind of funny now, but when I started racing, we were running with bias ply tires, and radial tires were just coming out for motorcycles. And what happened was they decided that 17-inch wheels were going to be the standard for radials, and the end result was the 85 RS I had a 17 front and 18 rear. There was also a certain width rim you had to use to run radials, and I just didn't, the bike didn't have them, so I had a choice. I could spend at the time a couple $1,000 buying new wheels for the bike, and then I'd have a 85 spec bike with able to run radial tires, or I just buy a newer bike. And so I sold that one and bought a newer bike. Now I'll tell a story some other time about my first ever race with it, because my first ever race was also my first ever real serious crash. But it was interesting. So anyways, I'll talk to you about that later. So anyways, that's it for now. Best Doctor signing off.